So I just watched Top Gun Maverick, and it was an amazing experience. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I can talk to you about whether this is a, 2 thumbs up kind of a movie or anything like that, because I don't really know that I know movies that well. But what I can tell you is two things. It was really amazing from a nostalgia standpoint. Like, I can remember being a young kid back in 1980, whatever, watching the first Top Gun, and I went straight home and I said to my mother, I want to be a fighter pilot. Like, literally, like, I was on 10. Like, I want to be a fighter pilot after watching that movie. And I think a whole generation of kids are going to watch this movie and want to be fighter pilots because they make it look cool and exciting and all of the things. But now, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 45 years old and I'm a psychotherapist. I want to tell you what stood out to me as I was watching this movie, because I think this movie did an excellent job of highlighting some very significant trauma triggers that a lot of us experience every single day in our lives. And 5 of them stood out to me. And I want to talk to you about these trauma triggers that are highlighted in this movie and how you can learn from this movie experience and how you could learn to deal with traumas in your own life. So the first trauma trigger that happened in this movie is grief and loss. To be honest with you, I think the biggest theme of this movie is grief and loss. So the premise of the movie is, in the original Top Gun, Tom Cruise, his character's name is Maverick. So Maverick's co-pilot, Goose was his name, died. And in this movie, Goose's son is going through Top Gun as well. And there's this big, huge mission that they have to go in. And Goose's son is dealing with a lot of grief and anger that he's holding on to because he now has to face and interact with the guy that in his mind killed his dad. Maverick is also dealing with grief and loss because he lost his best friend in that accident that happened in the original movie, and he still is carrying the pain and trauma from that experience. What's really cool about this movie is you watch these two men kind of face this grief and loss issue and the resentment and the anger and work to overcome those challenges. And it's cool because, like, the biggest thing that people do to harm themselves when they're dealing with grief and loss issues is they hold in their emotions. Like toxic masculinity, like it's not appropriate for a man to be emotional or to be sad or to show emotion. And here are these two kind of alpha men that are really strong and walking around Hollywood with their shirts off in these movies. But you watch them deal with the emotions associated with grief and loss and go through a healing journey in a really dramatized, Hollywooded out, super movie way. But you watch them go through the journey from trauma and pain and loss to a place of healing. And honestly, that was my favorite thing about the movie, is the way that the arc of that journey. And I think that that's really, really important. So what I want you guys to take away from that is, if you're dealing with a grief and loss issue, and at some point all of us will, be honest with your emotions, lean into your emotions, and confront those emotions and the people in your life. And when I say confront, I don't mean like go after them. I just mean like be authentic and genuine and deal with the emotion you have to deal with, because that matters and it's super important. The second thing that is a psychological trigger, a trauma trigger that stood out, is regret. I think probably the biggest thing that sends people into my office, like, I know that like it's depression and it's sadness and it's drug abuse and things like that, but honestly, it all whittles down to regret. People come to my office and they're like, I've been married to this bad person for 15 years and I regret the time that I lost. Or I've been using drugs and alcohol and I made some bad decisions that impacted my family and I regret what I experienced from impacting my family. And so regret is this really huge thing. And in this movie, there's a love interest. It's a different love interest than the previous movie, but there's a new love interest, which, by the way, I think was a bit of a plot hole, because they talked about her as if she's been in in Maverick's life like the whole time, but they don't really explain that. But anyway, there's a love interest in this movie, and Maverick, he obviously had hurt her in the past, And you watch this couple kind of like reestablish a relationship. And as someone who does counseling, and I work with couples a whole lot, it was wonderful to see, because I think that the woman has every right, the woman character, I should say, her name is Penny. Penny has every right to be upset about whatever happened. They never really explain what happened, but she has every right to be upset about whatever happened and hold Maverick accountable. You hurt me in the past. We're not good at this. We get together and it's really intense, and then you go away. And she's mad at him. And then you watch them. What she also does is so beautiful is she gives him like another chance to show that he's different, and Maverick takes that opportunity to show her that he's different. And the movie ends, as you know, the good guy gets the girl. But what I want you to get from that is, like, people do change and things do get better. Whenever couples come into my office, one of the first questions they ask me, they'll say, Elliott, can people get better from this? Whether it's an affair or some level of hurt or whatever the things may happen, they will overtly ask me, do people get better from this? And the answer is yes. I don't think I've ever told a couple, no, this is the death knell, because everything is recoverable. And I think this movie did a really good job of showing how you can resolve regret and get to a healthier place. I also want you to pay attention to guilt. Guilt is a huge trauma trigger and leads us down a really negative path. And Maverick is dealing with a lot of guilt, because Maverick, and I'm gonna try really hard, I've done a pretty good job of not giving away too many spoilers. I'm gonna try really hard not to make this like a spoiler-filled video. But Maverick did something to Goose's son. His name in this movie is Rooster. Maverick did something to Rooster, and he has a lot of guilt from having to do this thing. And Rooster is really mad at him about this. Maverick made a promise to Rooster's mom, and to keep that promise, Maverick had to do something that made it really hard for Rooster to continue in his career as a fighter pilot. And you watch how he deals with guilt, and you watch how Maverick kind of has to deal with that. And I watched that and I thought this was so wonderfully kind of displayed in the movie, because we all have guilt, because we often have to make really difficult decisions that the people in our lives disagree with. Like, you might have to tell your child, like, I don't think you're ready for this. Or you might have to tell a loved one, I don't think that that's the best choice for you. And sometimes we have to really sit with, but I did the right thing. And you watch the Maverick character go through that process and realize it was hard to do, but I had to keep this promise to his mother, and I did the right thing. The fourth thing I want you to pay attention to, a huge trauma trigger, is anticipated conflict. And what I mean by that, so again, in this movie, the way they have anticipated conflict is like there's a very dramatized, obviously Hollywood, like, we're going to go into battle. But oftentimes anticipated conflict triggers us to not be the best version of ourselves. And there is a character in this movie that they're all kind of vying for the top rank in this mission, this really huge mission that they have to do. And you can watch them, the negative parts of their personality come out because conflict brings about the parts of us that we're not always super duper proud of. And in this movie, you watch the characters kind of struggle and deal and pick on each other and bully each other. And you also have to watch them come together as a team. You know, whenever we're facing conflict, we don't have to struggle. And sometimes that conflict happens like, I know my wife's gonna be upset with me about this, or my husband's gonna be upset with me about that. And we don't always, or siblings, but we don't always deal with that well. And that will often be a trigger towards our trauma. But always remember, we're more connected than we are disjointed. We're more similar than we are dissimilar. And when we can remember that we're all on a team, I think it's better for us. I think a good example of this right now is the political environment in which we're currently in here in the United States. I think we keep forgetting that we're all United States citizens. We're not against one another. We're all on the same team, and when you can remember that, you handle anticipated conflict very well, and it does not have to cause a trauma experience. And I think the fifth and final thing that I'm going to say in this movie, a huge trauma trigger, is judgment. And Tom Cruise, apparently in the Navy, in the fictitious Top Gun Maverick world, in the Navy, he has a very bad reputation. In fact, his family has a very bad reputation. And it was like every time Maverick went into a meeting in this movie, they were like, we don't want you here, but this one person is the one who's allowing you to be here. And I watched that and I thought, imagine if every room you walk into, you know that most of the people in that room don't want you there. To be honest with you, I've been in that situation in this field. I practiced something called solution-focused brief therapy, and about 15 years ago when I entered into this field and I just written a book and was giving a lot of lectures, I'm an African-American guy, and I don't look like everybody else looks, and I don't talk like everybody else talks, and I would go to conferences and I could feel and also could hear and emails could see that a lot of people there did not want me there. But he's only here because of so-and-so. And I really resonated with that part of Maverick, because he was in so many situations where it's like, no one wants you here, and we're only tolerating you because that one person is in power and that one person wants you to be here. And I thought about, like, how do people handle like such high levels of judgment in a way that doesn't cause trauma, that doesn't cause scars, that doesn't cause wounds. And I'm gonna tell you, like, the most important thing I could tell you, honestly, like the biggest deal I could tell you, is in order for you to go through being judged, and all of us are judged at different points. Like, I talked to you about how Maverick was judged, I shared with you how I was judged, but in order for you to go through scenarios where you're being judged negatively, it's really hard, because sometimes people have chosen to view you that way and there's nothing you can do to influence it. But the winning formula, the way to win, the way to overcome that, is to be your authentic self. And I think that is on display beautifully in this movie, where Maverick is Maverick, and he's totally comfortable being Maverick. He's totally comfortable accepting the benefits and negatives that come with being who he authentically is. And the game changer in this world is being authentic. It's something that I've had to work on, and it's how I've dealt with being judged, and it's something that Maverick had to work at, and it's how he dealt with being judged. And I think this movie displays that beautifully. So those are 5 trauma triggers that you will see in this movie, but that's also how you're gonna see how this movie displayed them, but they also displayed how to manage them really well. And I thought it was a really well done way of showing these things. I'm not sure whether they did it on purpose or not, but I thought it was a beautifully demonstrated thing in this movie. So again, I cannot tell you whether this is like a thumbs up movie or a thumbs down. I absolutely loved it, but I have to be honest, mostly because it's nostalgic to me. There wasn't a huge plot line, there wasn't great, it was just great fight scenes and great action and great adventure. But I can't say like this is gonna be an award-winning, everybody should go see a movie. No idea, but I can tell you what it was like to be a psychotherapist watching this movie with my psychological lens, and I found those things to be amazing. So check out the movie and see if you see the things that I was saying, because I think you'll love it.